The summer transfer window has officially and bizarrely temporarily opened, and another squad rebuild awaits Queen's Park Rangers. So the question is, other than a bloody manager, which would be quite helpful, which positions are the club's biggest priorities over the next couple of months to fill, and how many signings are needed? Having completed my two-part squad review a couple of weeks ago and a number of new contracts and outgoings announced by the club since, it's time to discuss exactly that, so let's jump straight in. I'd love to hear your thoughts too, so let me know down in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, or leave a rating and all that good stuff if you like what you see in here. To start off, let's quickly recap what's been announced by the club so far in terms of new contracts and outgoings. On the contracts front, Rangers kicked off the off-season by announcing a new and well-deserved long-term deal for Jonathan Varane. That's looking very timely indeed, with Espanyol putting an offer on the table as of Monday. A one-year contract extension for Steve Cook was triggered as a result of the Rangers captain hitting a certain number of starting appearances and QPR retaining its championship status over his 2 seasons to date. The club have also activated the same extension for Mickey Frey to prevent him leaving the summer upon the expiry of his initial 18-month deal. Unsurprisingly though, Kenneth Powell's departure was announced last week at the end of his 3-year deal, while the club's retained list revealed that discussions are ongoing with Jimmy Dunn and, more surprisingly, Lucas Anderson, Jack Colback and Morgan Fox. Now naturally, if any of those 4 players are retained, that will affect the number of incomings we'll want and need, but for the purpose of this discussion, let's assume the most drastic scenario that none of those reach new deals. In that case, when looking at the squad in its entirety, I personally believe we need at least 8 first-team players for next season, whether they arrive as loan signings, permanent signings, or promotions from the development squad. And when looking at the profiles I think we need, I'd say that the predominant theme here is about adding a bit of a core of experience to supplement some of our younger, more promising players. We're very well stocked in goal, with Paul Nardi very likely to retain the number 1 shirt next season and one of either Joe Walsh or Murphy Cooper as reserve. That was obviously the role of Walsh last season, and he once again came in for the final game at Sunderland, though Cooper's impressive loan campaign at Stevenage may well give the club a tough decision to make during pre-season. Given we've got a potential total of 4 defensive departures should neither Dunn or Fox agree new deals though, recruiting for our backline is a huge priority. For me, we need 2 signings at right back, one to replace Jimmy Dunn as a starter in the team and another to take the place of Haverton Santos and or Harrison Ashby. Dunn will be the biggest challenge given his large number of offensive contributions and aerial threat last season, and while I don't necessarily expect us to scout for the exact same profile, I think it would be sensible for his replacement to be someone with a decent amount of championship experience to make that transition as smooth as possible, especially given right back has been a problem position for Rangers for a number of years now. With Ashby having returned to Newcastle and Santos still presumably on the club's list to move on this summer, we'll also need a new rotational right back, though given the cost associated with bringing in a new starter, I wouldn't be surprised if this was another young free or loan gamble to come in and take that spot. Now with Ronnie Edwards having sadly returned to Southampton, Fox potentially off and the loss of Dunn as cover, I'd say we also need 2 centre-backs in this window. In an ideal world that doesn't involve the director of performance working over Zoom, next season we should be looking at a centre-back partnership of 2 of Steve Cook, Jake Clark-Salter or Liam Morrison. But given all had ranging injury issues last season, the loss of Edwards as a consistent starter, the club's seeming reluctance over Cook's contract extension, and one less season player in Fox, another experienced head at centre-back is going to be really important. Given Cook will be moving on in a year's time, I think it would also be worthwhile us picking up another younger option to start blooding ahead of next summer, just like we did with Morrison. And if there's any possibility of that being a left footer in case Clark-Salter remains a no-go, that could potentially bring a lot more balance to the defence. At left back, I think there's a pretty good chance we'll see Lakesh and Escudina scrap it out in pre-season for a place as one of 2 right backs, but I'd be surprised if either is given a starting role, so with Powell having departed, we're also going to need a new starting fullback on this side of the pitch. Ideally, I think this would be someone of a similar age to Powell when he arrived, 23 or 24, and while I think them having been established as a starting left back elsewhere will be useful, I don't think they necessarily have to be a player already playing in the Championship. Moving into central midfield now, I think between Jonathan Varane, Sam Field and Kieran Morgan, we're pretty well stocked for deep-lying midfielders, but with Jack Colback potentially departing, I think we just need one more experienced centre mid in there for coverage and to help the others develop. When Colback played well, you could see the value of having a midfielder with years of Premier League and Championship experience under his belt, but his age and injury record puts me off of him being offered a new deal. So ideally, I think it's someone with a similar profile, closer to 30, someone, dare I say it, like Isaac Hayden. Obviously, the window has just opened and we've already got an offer on the table for Jonathan Varane, so if he does end up going, you can double double the number of centre mids that we'll need. Progressing further up the pitch, I think we're actually okay in the 10, and while Madsen and Dembele might look scarce in isolation with Lucas Anderson potentially leaving, so many of our wingers can play in the middle that I just don't think this is going to be a priority this summer. Similarly, over on right wing, assuming Harvey Vale has made a full recovery from the injury he arrived in W12 with back in January and he's ready for a proper pre-season, I think between him and Smith, who's also rumoured to be in talks for a new deal, the club may have moved smartly to address the lack of rotation here before the summer even arrived. Over on the opposite side though, we will need to pay some attention, partly because whoever is the next manager might be tempted to use Chair in the middle more often, and partly because Koki Saito's loan has ended and he's returned to Lamel. In an ideal world for me, Koki comes back on a permanent deal, but if not, I think we need a similarly young, tricky winger to provide competition and depth out on the left-hand side. If we were to look internally, sometimes I wonder if that could be someone like Ryan Colley. He did start last season out on the left, assisting Anderson for our first goal of the season against West Brom. And with Frey, Seller and hopefully Kelman in the mix up top next season, I wonder how much of a look in he'll get as a centre forward. But then again, I think given the right chances, he's one of this squad's most clinical finishers, so perhaps he would be wasted out on the wing. Similarly, we saw Emerson Sutton come in for some minutes at the end of last season, and his pace looked like exactly what we've missed out on the left, but at just 18, I think you could see how raw he still is, and so I wouldn't be too shocked if he heads out for a good loan next season. So, all in all, I think if Koki doesn't return, a good young winger of a similar profile will be really important in this window. So lastly then, up top, I don't think I'll be alone in saying we could do with one more experienced senior striker in this window. We all knew going into last season that 2 senior strikers wasn't going to be enough, and that's exactly how it played out because Frey and Seller were only available at the same time for just 10 out of 46 league fixtures. We even spent periods of the season with no senior striker available at all, a void initially filled by Colley, but later in the season left empty with him on the sidelines too. The reality is we're one of the only clubs in the league that went the season with just 2 senior striking options, and I can't help but feel it's going to catch us out one day. I also think that if the burden was shared by an extra senior striker, we'd get more out of our existing options. Frey's attacking returns weren't bad considering the number of games he played, and if there was more rotation, we wouldn't have had to drive him into the ground all the time. Seller is still unfortunately a bit of an unknown despite looking like he'd finally found himself just before getting injured, especially because we have no idea what he'll be like on the pitch after being out for most of the season. That's a gap that might be filled by Kelman on the back of his Golden Boot winning League One season on loan at Orient, and I think he 100% deserves a good run of starts in this team next season, but he is still unproven at Championship levels, so personally that's why I'd like to see that extra senior option in there, even more so if we end up accepting an offer for him. Colley will also be in this conversation, having signed a new long-term deal in January, though given his minutes depleted upon Frey's return, I am very interested to see how the club plans to keep him involved in the first team next season. As I said earlier, maybe that means we see him deployed out on the wing or in midfield. There is also, of course, Alfie Lloyd, but for me, he really needs a good League One loan next season to take his game to the next level. So overall, right now, that's at least 8 gaps we need to fill for me, whether that's new signings, development squad players, or loans, and of course that number will increase if we end up taking any surprise offers for other players. What kind of window we can have and the calibre of players we can sign will largely depend once again on whether Palace sell Eze. If we get a good £10 million sell on and that's injected into this squad, we can hopefully bring in some really decent replacements, but if he doesn't go, I just can't see us spending fees as significant as those we did last summer on the likes of Madsen or Seller. Anyway, these are just my views on what the squad needs. How many players do you think we need, and what's the number 1 priority in your eyes? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below, so do let me know. Of course, with transfer news starting to pick up as well, and with signings hopefully soon to be announced, I'll be posting plenty of content covering any incomings. So if you enjoyed this one and you're new to Hoopsa, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you soon. Cheers!